Day 2 of the Eppynt, very similar to day 1, but there was some extra going. It looked all very easy first thing in the morning, but it did cut up a little later. Bob Perrin was responsible for quite a lot of the route. Both of the tests had cut up a little bit. And of course, by day 2, some riders are getting rather tired. In the veterans class, Marcel Woon had finished 3rd on day 1, perhaps because he fell off on the test. He went better on this second day and moved up 1 place, but still finished 3rd overall for the weekend. Today there were 4 tests for the veterans and the clubman riders. Brian Higgins must have slept well overnight, because he came out and won the veterans class on this second day, and he finished runner-up for the weekend. I hope Brian doesn't take this result too seriously. We want to hear our favourite commentator again. And the Premier Award in the veterans class over the 2 days went to number 353 Dougal Walker. Dougal had done all the hard work on day 1, winning the class with a lead of over 30 seconds on the rest of the field. In the clubman class, Daryl Bolter started day 2 as he'd finished day 1, and he won the first 2 tests. On the final test, he had a very slow time, obviously a problem with the bike, and he was unable to finish the day. In 3rd place on this second day was number 282 Alistair Bramwell from Devizes, and he also finished 3rd for the weekend. With 1 Husky rider retiring, Ricky Meyer could move up a place. Remember, he'd finished 3rd on day 1. He was now 2nd on day 2. He was getting quicker as the day went on. He won test 3. And this weekend, Ricky finished runner-up overall in the clubman class. He was beaten on day 1 by Giz Edmonds, the gap about 17 seconds. And Giz beat Ricky again on day 2, although the gap now was only 7. So there were mixed fortunes in this clubman class. Giz had bad luck at the Havron going out on the first day. And Daryl Bolter could see the finish here at the Eppynt, but just didn't make it. So it was Giz Edmonds who took the Premier Award here at the Eppynt. Fate had struck yet again in the expert class, and Gareth Andrew had literally blown a plug out of his bike. So Andy Frost, who finished 4th on day 1, now finished 3rd on day 2, and 3rd overall for the weekend. Andy, now the top expert 4-stroke rider for 2002. William Jones had finished runner-up on day 1, beating Richard Roper by just a few hundredths of a second. Would it be that close between these two on the second day? There were 6 special tests for the experts, and William beat Richard on only 2 of these. William finished runner-up in the expert class on day 2 and runner-up overall for the weekend. And the Premier Award went to number 116 Richard Roper from Halstead. He won this second day and gained valuable points. In the championship class, Edward Jones had been the top 125cc rider on day 1, and he did it again on day 2. Remember, 5th overall on day 1. He managed to move up to 4th on day 2. On this second day, he'd managed to beat Ewan McConnell by nearly 2 seconds. McConnell had finished 4th on day 1, and he wasn't going any slower on day 2. I just think that Edward Jones was that little bit quicker. Ewan was having a very good championship series, runner-up at the Breclan, 3rd at the Havron, and runner-up at the Scorpion. Even though Edward Jones beat him on this second day, Ewan did finish 4th overall for the weekend. On this second day, the top 3 places were to be sorted out between the Knight brothers and Paul Edmondson. It looked as though Ewan was going to beat Paul. He won the first 4 tests, but Fast Eddie came back later on in the day to win the second 4. Ewan finished in 3rd place on day 1, and it was going to be the same on day 2. The gap today between him and Fast Eddie, only 7 seconds. Paul had finished the first day 21 seconds down on David Knight. That was an awful lot to pull back on day 2. I think he would be happy if he could just win this second day. That was asking for a lot when we know that David had won 6 out of the 7 tests yesterday. Paul did win the 5th test, and by a big margin, almost 14 seconds. It had been David's bad luck. A plastic stake had gone through his back wheel. 14 seconds was a big margin on 1 test, but there were 8 today. Eddie did manage to win the final test of the day, but the difference only about half a second. He was runner-up on day 1, and again runner-up on day 2, and runner-up overall for the weekend. Paul was also the top 4-stroke rider, and a little later on would receive a very special award from the Deacon family. I hadn't seen the riders in the work area at the end of day 1, but I found out that some hadn't fitted new tyres. Oh, you didn't have a new front tyre yesterday, David?
No, can't afford it.
I think the funds are running low with the Knight family. David had got a new back tyre. Once again, he was really in a class of his own. After 4 tests, he was over 40 seconds up on Paul Edmondson. He had a bit of a scare on the 5th test. He got tangled up with one of the plastic stakes which was lying on the ground. It wasn't part of the course. That knocked 14 seconds off his lead. David did slow up a little bit towards the end of the day. I think he knew he'd got it won. He did win test 7, but only by 0.3 of a second.
So Paul, look.
And the final test of the weekend went in Paul Eddy's favour, and the difference only about half a second. There were presentations at the end of the weekend made by Ted Bartlett.
Can I have an individual first?
And Paul Edmondson received the John Deacon Memorial Trophy from Mrs. Deacon.
Thank you very much for making this event possible, John. I'm proud.
Thank you very much.
So that was the Eppynt Enduro and round 4 of the British Championship Series. Signwriter Bob Mullins admiring his work. He was riding this weekend. Did anyone see him?